We've now arrived at our GPO. The reason the GPO is here is to explore the Easter Rising in 1916. Remember, when you come to our GPO, the decision to stage the Rising came up in 1914. This is not the Rising people planned, and even in the weeks beforehand the Rising changes, but this is the Rising that happened. So our GPO exhibition here takes you through the Rising itself. The building here itself, we've the facade of it. It would have flown two flags on it during the Easter Rising. The tricolour would have flown down on the bottom end there, and up on this end, the flag that we all know, the flag with the Irish Republic in green, white and orange on it. You've come inside our GPO now. What we've got in this very first room is a timeline of Easter week. In keeping with what's going on outside, it takes you through the different events of the different days. The other thing we've got here in the GPO is we have a whole series of recreated rooms that you might have seen during the Easter Rising. These rooms are based on accounts from the Bureau of Military History. There are evidence, if you like, that support what we've put into these rooms. The rooms are based on what the rebels said they saw in these as they broke their way through buildings during the Easter Rising. Because one of the things they planned to do before the Rising started at all was to join buildings up. And so they broke through the walls, connected rooms, so they didn't have to go out onto the street. And we've based these rooms on accounts that were collected in the period 1947 to 57 by the Bureau of Military History. So now you're into one of our broken through buildings in our GPO. As I said, the rebels planned beforehand to connect buildings up, and we've based these buildings as much as we can on those Bureau of Military History accounts as our evidence. This is supposed to be a recreation of Chancellor's studio, because there is an account on the wall here of them breaking all the way down into Chancellor's studio. It's a photographer's studio, and so that's why we've recreated the backdrop and so on here, and we have photographs that actually come from Chancellor's studio on the wall over here. When you come in here, it can seem a little bit like we're going to have a party in here because you can see all the food on the table. Now, the reason the food is there is because that's what's talked about in some of these accounts. And the reason the food is there is because people stayed in their houses while the fighting was going on at the time. This is why so many civilians die in the Easter Rising, because they're afraid of their houses being looted, and they stay in until the walls get broken through. So we have accounts here, for instance, of them coming into a house and the fire was still lit. Of them coming into another house, there was a chicken on the table, so the rebels ate the chicken. There's also accounts of them coming into a house where they see a photograph of Eamon Kent on the mantelpiece, so that's why he's on our mantelpiece. This room here commemorates the 16 men who got executed after the Easter Rising. The execution started almost directly after the Rising. Ireland was under martial law, and so the army began to execute what it saw as the leaders at the time. Now, when people began to hear about these executions, they began to change their mind in terms of their support for the Easter Rising. John Dillon at the time got up in Parliament, and there's an account of it here from the Anglo-Celt of the time, where he suggests that these executions are actually changing people's opinion. The reason this courtyard is here is to give you an idea of the scale of the devastation in the centre of Dublin. You can see these photographs in books today, but when you blow them up to this size, you get a real sense of how much damage was done. The centre of Dublin, as you can see, was almost completely destroyed here. The other thing is, it said inside that we were in Chancellor's studio from the Easter Rising. And down here on this chimney top, you can see Chancellor's studio written there. And the clock down at the side there was actually over the door of Chancellor's studio. So it gives you an idea of how far down through Dublin, through O'Connell Street, the rebels had broken through the buildings that day.